Hey, soccer freaks. We are back here on ATL on Fire. We're now on YouTube. So if you're watching this on your TV, hit the subscribe button right down there, the red button, ring the bell so you get all of the future notifications on segments that I'll be posting on podcasts. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify, whatever your catcher is, we're available on all of them. Tell a friend, subscribe, and thanks for listening. Thanks for following us on Twitter at ATL on Fire. Really enjoying some of the folks who are contributing to the feedback on polls that we've been posting there. And I'm going to kick right into gear on my fiery rant, one of the segments I do on the show here. And my rant today is really about the suspension of Franco Escobar and the way that MLS as a league is now using VAR as a post facto way to go back and change the decision that a referee made on the field. I've got my problems with how VAR works during the game as a way to do that, especially on a issue that the center ref has already made a decision on. And you've got a group of people who are looking at monitors, going through instant replay. Say a bunch of people may know a lot about soccer. You can guarantee that they all have different opinions on that play with Franco Escobar. I guarantee you if you went to ESPN FC and you had your pundits talking about it, you'd have different viewpoints. One thing I think they would all agree on is it was a poor challenge. It was a bad foul. But the referee on the field at the time was right there and chose not to throw any cards. And there was certainly a scuffle afterwards. It was a lazy tackle. One thing I will say is it certainly wasn't one that was, a leg breaker or anything like that. It was just, again, a bit of a trip. It was kind of nasty in that way in terms of being unprofessional as a professional foul because it was so, it was clear he intended to do it. But to go back, days after a game and, have a suspension for something like this when the referee on the field didn't issue any cards on the field, I think you just need to move on. If not, then you become a league that it would only make sense that you would have people who are fully committed as a committee to be watching the games on replay constantly and figuring out if somebody did something malicious based on their opinion. So that is a really slippery slope that the MLS is going down by using VAR in a way to do this, because there's so much gray in these types of things that, why open that Pandora's box? But that's it. There's a couple other things I could rant about. We're going to get into it on this podcast. And Dave, my co-host.
Are you saying that hindsight is 2020, Mikey Dobbs?
We're going to talk about it all. Hindsight is 2020. And yeah, I mean, it's just, there's some things that are silly in terms of, using technology to make the game better. And I think this is one that is really crossing the line.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, you can go back and you can look and you can evaluate and you can, and it's worse than a slippery slope.
Yeah. More importantly, Dave, are you having a glass of wine tonight? It's a Tuesday night, but expect that you're trying something. You were just telling me about your vineyard and you're about to harvest. So I'm sure you're in the spirit.
That's correct. We're making our own wine, which is going to be American grape and Norton, which we're very excited about. The harvest is Sunday, and hopefully we'll have our first ever vintage by New Year's. But tonight, I'm drinking a Merlot from Washington State, from Walla Walla. It's called Expedition by the Canoe Ridge. It's very nice.
That's awesome. I am mixing it up tonight. Just wasn't really in the mood for wine, and my brother got me a really nice bottle of scotch for my birthday. And if you can pronounce that, then I'll give you bonus points. All I know is it's absolutely delicious. Yeah, single malt scotch. A Buna Haben, something like that.
Now, is it true that you have been drinking Corona to save the good people of Corona during this madness?
You can only fight Corona with Corona or Clorox. I don't know which, but I've chosen Corona as my weapon of choice. It's easier to inject into my throat.
Saving our good friends from Mexico from a lot of ignorance and why people would stop drinking Corona. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they did close down the factories. I guess it's Corona and Modelo down in Mexico. I think they're back in business, but
Mhm.
yeah, hopefully they're able to catch up to my demand. Um, so before we get into things, about whining, too much, like, I guess, what were your thoughts on this last game? I didn't think it was a great showing, even though we got the win.
No, to be completely honest, it was very DeBoer-esque. I think the tactics that Stephen Glass, implemented were, you could see that he is trying to correct what he sees as a couple of flaws of the DeBoer era. One of the things that I have really railed on in the DeBoer era is how you have the outside backs going so much forward right away all the time, and which is fine. But if you're going to do that, you better get offense for them. And they just go mindlessly forward and then end up just standing there. And maybe I'll get to it in a minute. But so one of the things that we talked about in the MLS's back tournament, when the outside backs went flying forward, we had nobody back. And we gave up a goal right down the middle. And it was a terrible goal, which we talked about on the podcast. But so he has clearly tried to correct that. So he still has the outside backs going flying forward exactly like DeBoer did. He has the two center backs going wider to protect for the spaces that the outside backs have vacated. And he has Remedy sort of sitting in. And so, okay, yes, maybe that's good that you're protecting the space, but a couple of times Remedy wasn't quite back yet, and the two center backs were really far apart. There was a gaping hole. If we give up the ball in a turnover, they could have run right down the middle of us. And so to me, he's fixing a problem that you say, okay, great, it's fixing a problem, but if you fix a problem, it should be a problem that's worth fixing, right? And the problem I have with it is all of that outside back, going forward or whatever, and we're getting so little offense from it.
Yeah, and there was some good moments, I think, with George Bello up front. One of the things I liked about him playing, the good side of what I saw with George Bello was, I don't think he was necessarily mindlessly running forward. He wasn't afraid to attack people, which I liked, and there's a couple moments like he was able to beat the guy and get some crosses in. But what I did see was when he, again, did not have the ball, he felt a little lost. He didn't have the posture and awareness of really what was going on. And I saw a lot of that, not just him, but I don't know if you noticed in the first half, particularly when we had it in our backfield, people were not in good shapes in terms of where they knew where each other were on the field. There were not good triangles. People are stepping into other people's spaces.
Well, the reason why I would disagree with you about mindless is because, so it's very easy to see that Bella was going forward to good effect when we attacked down the left. But one thing that probably many people didn't notice, but when we were attacking in the middle or attacking down the right, Bella was going up there also, just 40-yard sprint, okay? And the number of times in the game that Bello made a 40-yard sprint, never was involved in the play one iota because we were on the right side, and then eventually had to come back 40 yards. I mean, you might as well, in my opinion, have taken him and said, okay, when we attack down the right, what I want you to do is step off the field and just run wind sprints. Yeah. All you're doing is wasting his energy for nothing. And not only does he not contribute to the offense because we're on the right side and we don't need him yet, we're never going even close to him, but then he's got to sprint back, so he's just tiring himself out.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more measure he could use on when he chooses to run up front. I'm not going to disagree with you there. I guess more of my point was that when he did have the ball up front and he did make the runs, he was dangerous.
Oh, he was
And
terrific when we attacked down the
but
left side. It was really effective.
but the thing I noticed most from George Bello, and there was a couple of moments if Nashville was worth anything as a team, which is a whole other issue I have with the game. They just were completely unimpressive to me in terms of really, taking advantage of what I thought was a bad performance by Atlanta United in general. There were moments where, again, that ball across into the space where George Bello had given up by going forward was absolutely there. There was one time particularly that had a Nashville player been sharper with that ball across the field, it would have been the same situation that happened several times in the MLS back tournament. So I hear you there.
But on the right side, I would go with the flip side, which is so Escobar didn't get down the right side as much. But the other thing that happened was so Brooks Lennon was playing right wing, and Brooks Lennon was coming back and defending and, ostensibly helping out Escobar on the right side. And we didn't really need it. And many, many times when we won the ball, he was defending unnecessarily, and we had nobody to outlet on the wing. That Al Marone, being open when we turned the ball over in that gap and let's run at him. Escobar many, many times was standing right next to our defense. Brooks Lennon was standing right next to our defenders, Escobar and originally it was Walks, and then later it was Robinson. But why do you need that? Why do you have him coming all the way back? I mean, he's the naturally to do that, and you say, oh, look, he's working so hard, but he's not really helping us defensively. And then when we win the ball, he's not available offensively. And so one of the things that you saw from Brooks Lennon is almost every time he got the ball to feet. How many times do you remember in this game where he got the ball running into space? And the one thing you would say about Brooks Lennon is his strength is his pace and his physicality, right? He's strong and he's fast. So, but in tight spaces, it's not, his dream. Like if you compare, for example, to Gressel's role, where Gressel was often hanging out there and available, and we'd put it into space, and many times he had the possibility of serving it in early just because he was running with his head open.
Yeah. I still like with Brooks Lennon, I don't know what to think of him. All I know is I'm just not seeing enough of production, I guess is the best way to put it. I like his work rate. I feel like he's definitely a little more defensive minded to your point. So he might be kind of duplicative of where Escobar is back there. But, I think I'm not seeing enough diversity and dynamic play from him that Gressel did offer in terms of being able to cut in or know the timing of the cross and things like that. I think those things are, he's had enough minutes now and I just haven't seen it.
But he's been asked to do stuff that is just not in his strength. He's been asked to get the ball and play, give go kind of Petey kind of or Barco kind of football. And that's not his strength. His strength is power and pace and running in spaces. So you've got to figure out as a coach, if you're going to play him as the wing, you've got to figure out a way that he's out running in space and available. And then he's a danger because then the left back has got to be super worried that he could run right by him, and it opens up everything for everybody else.
Yeah. So one of the other things, and this was going to be one of my rants, was Adam John. I just felt like there's just not enough to pick on the guy to have it be my rant. But, really unimpressed with any sort of impact on the game. And I know that, Nashville had some more stout guys in the back to match up with him and his physicality, which is one thing. It doesn't matter. Like I want to see the smile wiped off his face, and he, not just be happy that he's playing in the MLS and not the USL. He needs to get mean and use that physicality to do something. And I just feel like, that maybe Kubo or somebody should have come on earlier, because, it was clear early on he was really just not making any sort of difference with his physicality and winning balls. And he even got pushed over in the corner, which was a foul, yes. But, he's not selling it. He's not getting it done.
But
That's it.
his movement is non-existent. I mean,
Yeah.
he looks to me like a product of really bad coaching in America, right?
Yeah.
Because he is strong, he's on the ball, he gets, in many ways, in some respects, he was much better served in the DeBoer system where we were on the ball all the time, very static in the box, and we ended up forcing a lot of crosses and that kind of thing, and maybe he might have bailed us out a few times by scoring some of those goals because he can clearly finish and he's physical in the box, but in the middle of the park his movement is non-existent, and so we might as well stick a cone out there, right? He's just doing nothing for us.
Yeah.
And Kubo, like, to me, I haven't seen as much. I saw a little bit of him when he was in MLS previously. But he's also a physical player. He's not quite as big as John, but he plays very physically, right? And yet his movement is way better than John. So
Right.
he is going to be a huge upgrade.
Yeah. So let's kind of work back then. The I guess star of the show in terms of goals is PT. But I don't know if I said this on Twitter or what, but I think he did two things right all night, and that was those two goals, which were great goals. Especially the first one, I thought PT did a really nice job of putting in the work to get that into the net. I mean, he did a great job of taking it down, staying strong on the ball, and really put on a fantastic move there on the end to cut it and slot it in with his left foot. So I thought that first goal was really all PT in terms of getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly Stephen Glass is, unleashed PD. If you follow our Twitter account, the greatest tweet, in my
Yeah.
opinion, in Atlanta United history is about PD. It says, in reference to Harry Potter, Master has given me a new pair of socks. PD is free.
So I had to ask my
But
wife what that meant, but I get it now. But nice
it's hilarious.
retweet.
It was
Yeah, I thought
absolutely
that's pretty
hilarious.
funny.
And the Twitter person who sent it out, I can't remember her name, but she said that her husband didn't think it was funny, but your husband's wrong. That was very funny. But the one thing you would say is, so the way he has it, so he's clearly, Stephen Glass has made it a little bit asymmetrical, if you will. Bello is much more forward, which means that, and we're covering a little bit in behind him, so we're not so vulnerable. And that means that PD can stay a little bit farther forward and has supposedly a little more freedom. And if you have to give Stephen Glass credit for something, you would say that, well, because he's a little bit further forward than he was under DeBoer, who insisted that everybody be part of the system, that he was more available to make those two great plays.
Yeah.
Whether that truly bears out over a long term, I don't know, but you got to give him some credit.
Yeah, and the other, I mean, my point about those being the only two things, right? I felt like there was a few balls he made some nice passes in the space to people, so I don't want to say those are the only two, but he again did not look like a player that could ever play in Europe the way he was fumbling about with trying to do too much and almost tripping over the ball at times. Like
I don't know. He looks to me like a player in La Liga. There's a number of players who, the way La Liga plays, it's a little bit slower. You're allowed to, fade in and out of games so you can pop up for a moment of brilliance and change the match and you're a hero. So
yeah.
he looks that kind of player. I mean, and I'm a fan of PD's. I think he's great.
Yeah, there's some things he does that absolutely drive me crazy. And again, that goes, I've talked about that on other podcasts. We don't need to rehash it. But the second goal, a fantastic finish again. But it's what a great player should have done when that ball gets laid on a plate like that, in my opinion. And it was very nice. It was near post, upper left, maybe a couple different places he could put that. But hey, great finish. But again, I would expect that from a player of his quality.
Yeah, it's a sensational finish. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
the
the two goals are world-class goals. So all credit to him.
Um, so who else do we want to zoom in on in terms of a player on the field and their performance?
There's one more player, and I think the one thing that Stephen Glass may have done that could be a huge improvement. So remember under Tata, one of the things that he did is just had Remedy sit in front of the back four. And for God only knows what reason, De Boer had these crazy schemes. You often saw Remedy even advanced up the field further than Nogby, for example. And one of the things that was very different already in this game is that Remedy was once again sitting in front of the back four. And
Yeah.
that should make us defensively more solid and go from defense to offense a little better. Because he was brilliant in that role, and in my opinion, really awful in the role that De Boer gave to him.
Oh, I agree with you. One of the things, another thing that could have been my rant too, is the tackle by Meza that ended up being a yellow card. What were your thoughts on that? And the commentators really summed it up as far as I was concerned. I was like, if you're going to take tackles like that out of the game, maybe this isn't a game I want to watch anymore. I mean, you can't take defense out. He was 100% through the ball on that, and yeah,
Yeah,
he
got the
got
ball.
the leg second on a fabulously timed tough tackle. Hey,
This is very classic MLS refereeing, which
yeah,
is, I think, too many of the MLS referees really didn't play enough. Well, I don't know if it's play enough, but you get the feeling, why? So why are the Premier League and the European referees so much better than the
yeah,
MLS? And I think it's day in and day out, growing up around the game, watching it all the time, and you get to realize that that tackle not only is just part of the game, but one of the things you get a sense for as a referee, a good referee, is what the players want and what the players don't want. And I agree with you completely that any player, barring some Neymar role or whatever, who's being honest, wants that tackle in the game as being legal. And so, but if you don't grow up watching games in and day out, you have to fall back much more on the letter of the law. Did he get in a little bit of his foot or whatever, instead of saying, what is it that we want the game to be? What do we want to be illegal, and what do we want to be legal, and what the players want? Like, if you as a referee make a call that nobody was going to be upset if you didn't make a call, then it's a bad call, right? The play should go on. The players should own the game at some level, right? And it doesn't mean the players always get what they want, but
yeah.
but if you consensus amongst the players that certain things should be allowed, and I think if you got the majority of people, they would say that tackle belongs in the game.
Yeah. I agree, and don't get me wrong. I mean, it was a tough call on the field. It was a bang bang play, and it was certainly on the cusp of being a bad tackle, but it wasn't. And to your point, I think that is something that with more hours as a ref, you need to get right. All
And the
right,
referee caused the skirmish on the sideline with Bello too by just making a horrendous, throw-in call,
yeah,
which you would say, oh, who cares? And the players should be better about it. But players are fighting all the time. And if you get something as simple as a throw-in call completely wrong, which he did, and it was so obvious, it makes players angry.
yeah.
You got to get those things right when they're that obvious. Obviously, sometimes it's a bang bang, it's impossible, and the players will forgive you for that. But when it's that obvious, you get that angry reaction, right? And you should know it, right,
Yeah.
when it happens.
I mean, there was a lot of frustration because of that on the field. I mean, you could sense it big
Uh-huh.
time, especially with no fans in the field. You were just feeling that boiling up from all the players, and luckily they didn't let that take over completely. They were able to keep their heads and get the win. Um, you froze up for a second there. Good, you're back.
I have to say, early on in the game, there was some just pretty horrendous commentary um, about the fans or whatever. But a little bit later in the game, I can't remember which one of them it was, but there was a little play on that when Atlanta United got the goal and they were in a little possession, and one of the commentators said something basically about now they've gotten the virtual fans into it. You know, the Atlanta United
Oh
fans are
yeah.
really into it. And that I thought was really clever and funny, right? Like, okay, you know, it's obviously somebody pressing a button, right?
Yeah.
So, I thought that was funny. So I was a little down on the refs early, on the commentary early, because I thought it was some of the way they treated that whole situation with the empty stands was a little cheesy and weird.
Yeah.
But later, I think they got it right.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I was watching the game with one of the neighbors and we were talking about, I wonder if there's any rules about how the music or how the crowd is music and chants are pumped in. Like, is that, you know, is there a guide to that, or are they allowed to crank it up and move it down however they want? And is it run by like some neutral party? Because it does seem like it would be, you know, a little bit of an advantage. I don't know.
Here, I have to say, here on the ATL on Fire podcast, we have to have the fans continuously behind us. It's something that we lack, and we maybe want to work on. Virtual audience. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could take advantage of that.
Dave, who else is worth mentioning from the game? Or, you know, I thought Hyman was relatively quiet because my mind's not going to him during that game. What were
Yep,
your thoughts there?
Rosetto as well. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of disappeared in the match a little bit. But, you know, again, the other thing that we have now is, at least first game, we have three center midfielders. So, you know, there's a little bit more of a dynamic, and they don't have to be as prominent, and we can still control the midfield. We had, you know, a vast majority of possession. It was 60% at one point. I don't know what the final was, but um, you know, one of the things you have to say though, you know, 60% possession and you get outshot 16-5. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of those shots were long shots that weren't really dangerous from Nashville,
Yeah.
but still, it's not good. Not good getting outshot, but also not good 60% possession and you get 5 shots yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember, you know, it was at least 20 plus 30 minutes before we got a shot on goal. And they had, yeah, it was tough there in the certainly the first 30 minutes of that game, if I recall correctly.
This idea that you're going to get a more attacking era just by liberating players and saying, oh, you can go more forward, it's just madness. This is coaching speak,
Yeah.
right? That's not how you actually have to have a way of breaking down teams.
Yeah, and I felt like Josetto was obviously feeling his way into the team. I mean, he's
Mhm.
only played what, probably three games at most,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
He played very little in the MLS's back tournament.
Yeah,
Like he came on a couple times. I don't know whether he even started. Maybe he started one match. I can't remember.
yeah. Well, and then Miles Robinson came on for Mesa, correct, after the injury.
Yeah, and clearly he was fine, which means that I think you're overthinking the injury situation,
Yeah,
right? You know, the fact that he doesn't start and Barco doesn't start, and they, is for all everything we've heard, is just very minor
yeah.
knocks. Like at
And
some point, you got to be like, suck it up and play. We need you.
as I understand, they said everybody is healthy going in that game, and we saw no Barco. And as I understand it, uh, he's not on the injury report this week because Doug Roberson was talking about that. And it's a bit of the controversy now that if he's not listed on the injury report, why is Darren Eel saying he's got a knock, but he's fine or whatever? And, you know, because now there's rumors that they're putting him in a glass jar because they want to trade him during the European window, which is unlikely. It's certainly possible, but unlikely. But at the same time, you know, why haven't we seen them? Is there some other story looming there? Why wouldn't he be on the field?
I think it's a question of Stephen Glass and all of these modern coaches just being overly cautious on the players and their status. And you know, in fairness, they have a lot of matches coming up in a short period of time, and maybe he thinks, okay, we can use that as an excuse, and then we can have him rested coming for the next second game. And you know, there's something to be said for that. But it's a, I mean, he got away with it, but it's a big gamble, right? You know, it. if you lose the first match at home to Nashville as a coach, right, you lose the team.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to win that match, and it worked. So credit to him. You got to give him credit. But if it were me coaching that team, I would want to have, regardless of the 6-game future, I would have wanted to go out and make a statement, for nothing else, for confidence, to play our best team and play, at home, give it our best game.
Yeah. All right, so I'm Dave. I'm going to jump to a new segment. Hopefully, we can have enough content to make this part of our regular gig here. But we're jumping to our Twitter ATL on Fire happenings. A couple of polls I've run since the last time we did a podcast, and I think the most relevant one, just to kick off, is the fact that if the folks that follow us on ATL on Fire had to give us a grade. A being, an A in terms of a good grade, B, okay, C, poor, D, close to failing, right? Nobody gave us a D. I was close to giving ourselves a D, but PT scored those goals that were quite nice. I gave us a C personally, even with the win, but 81%. Gave us a B and 6% A. So very few people giving us a great performance, which I think is fair.
We're an optimistic bunch.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm more in the C range.
Yeah, and going into the game, I asked if people would have been most happy with a win, clearly seeing we're playing attacking soccer, keeping a clean sheet, or seeing players smile. Over 50%, 54% just wanted to see attacking soccer. I think that was the overwhelming opinion, but 35% just wanted to win, and 9 or 10% wanted to just see a smile. So I feel like, yeah, we got the win there, but I don't necessarily think we saw attacking soccer.
Now, most importantly, Mikey Dobbs, what's the poll on the ATL on Fire podcast? What do we get as a grade?
Oh, well, maybe I should put that out to the listeners after the show. I'll be happy with a C. We'll see how it goes. All right. What other ones do we have on here? So, yeah, you had posted about, Stephen Glass's previous record and, the excitement around him as a coach. I think we'll see how it goes here in coming months, but I think it goes to kind of the bigger question of who's going to be the next coach after Stephen Glass. I don't think he's the long-term solution. And when is it going to happen?
It was amazing. I put out that tweet which literally just had the statistics of Stephen Glass when he was the Atlanta United 2 manager, which were really poor. I mean, we gave up 77 goals on Atlanta United 2 in 34 matches, which is pretty atrocious. And, people say, well, it's amazing to me how people come back and say, well, he was forced to play the tactics. He has the youngest team. He's not developing a team. He's developing players. And all of that is true, fair enough. But what I would counter that is, if you take a really great coach, a Guardiola, Klopp, whatever you think is a terrific coach, you think that those coaches would have had those statistics coaching the Atlanta United 2?
Yeah. And I saw,
and now that doesn't mean that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I saw some of the rebuttal in terms of, his job is to, bring up the talent, and, there's a lot of changes with players going up and down. Again, to your point, I thought, most of those are excuses. Like, you don't have to have the best record in the world, but it should be a winning record at minimum.
And no matter what you do, any kind of coach getting any kind of organization amongst a team cannot give up 77 goals in 34 matches. It's just atrocious record. And one of the things I do not fathom, and I will never understand and never agree with, is these people who say, well, he's developing players, but not developing the team or whatever. If you are developing players, and that has to include defenders, if you're developing defenders and midfielders and forwards, you will not have that record. These are not, I mean, they're not perfectly correlated, but they're not separable. If you do a fabulous job of developing all the different players, you cannot have that bad a
Yeah.
record.
And then, okay, so one of the other interesting points is, well, oh, he's forced to adopt Frank de Boer's system, which may not have been Glass's system, to accomplish just that. Now, do you think that's a fair argument, where maybe that's completely opposite of how Stephen Glass wants to think about, a total football?
Well, certainly not anymore, because he's been handed the keys and he basically played Frank de Boer's system, right? So if he had some system in his mind that he thought was so much better and he was going to play that, de Boer never thought of, it doesn't exist, because he would have played it.
All right. One of our other polls, Dave, was what restaurant do you miss the most, either in the stadium of Mercedes-Benz or just nearby in that walking distance area? The poll had Game Changers as 60%, Molly B's 20%, No Mas Cantina, which I've never been to, 20%, and I threw in Restaurant 10, which I never even heard of. I had to look it up.
Well, in our seats, we have we're the elitist booth, in the what do they call that? The whatever Cherokee Casino
Yeah.
booth. We don't want to admit that, but we are. And the we used to have Iberian pig, but then they changed it to panko or whatever. And the panko's pretty good.
Yeah, the panko's nice, but after being spoiled with Iberian pig, frankly, it was just a tough pill to swallow.
The fries at the Iberian pig were terrific.
So based on what we were just talking about, this will be the last Twitter poll. I basically said, given the current talent that we have, to maximize the talent, if you were the coach today, and this is essentially transitioning into Cat's Corner, the poll that I did. So Dave, if you were the coach today, given the talent that has been given to you by Carlos Bocanegra and in the front office, the way that it's shaped out over the last 6+ months with Rosetto, Jürgen Damm, all these new folks that are coming in, what formation would you go with predominantly, and how would you morph? And, what are some of the things that you would think about in terms of maximizing the talent of the players that you see on our roster today? 56% on our poll said that they wanted to go with the 4-2-3-1. Do you agree, or you want something different?
I actually don't think. I mean, my recollection is that 4-5-1 was not in the poll.
I labeled it as a 4-2-3-1 just to be a little cheeky.
I'd play 4-5-1, and I would keep it simple. So, our team is not built with a classic striker at this point without Martinez. Maybe Kubo could be, the one. But we have a lot of creative people behind them. And if you have people in the midfield, Petey and Barco with pretty free reins, one on the right, one on the left behind them. And we're built to counterattack, with speed on the wings. Now they've spent all this money with speed. They've got Brooks Lennon, and they have Bello, and they have Dam, Jürgen Damm, and they have Mulroney, right? So much pace, right? Not necessarily fabulous players, skillful players, not the Gressels of the world that we had in the past, or who was the guy the first year who went to DC United? Oh my goodness, forgetting his name.
Oh yeah, I'm blanking too.
But anyway, but we had some guys with real skills and who could break people down. But these players are athletic.
Assad.
They are Emil Assad. They're athletic, and they are strong, and they're pacey, and they're built to counter, right? And so I would play it very, very simple. A 4 in the back, one defensive midfielder, Remedy sitting in front of them. I feel like our defenders are excellent. We could have, without doing any of this, what I consider garbage overthinking it, just play a very, very solid 4 in the back. allow the outside backs to go forward, but only, in an overlapping capacity, not this flying up the wings or whatever.
So
And really,
who's your four in the back?
so it'd be Bello probably out left and Escobar out right, and then the center two, certainly Robinson,
And
and
Mesa.
probably Meza. You could have Walks, but I think that's a solid back
Yeah.
four. And if there's any weakness in it, Meza maybe pace, maybe Walks in terms of reading the game a little bit, but Robinson has been just terrific. And any of those deficiencies, as long as you don't have people running at your back four, you're fine. And so if you sit Remedy in front of them, I would say get up the field and, basically fight at midfield for the ball with those back five, basically. And then as soon as we win it, the remaining five on the field go and have a lot of aggressive, but sitting back in a counterattack style where everybody goes and you don't know who's coming at you. Because if we're just being honest about how we're doing, if we're going to possess the game or whatever, we don't have the players who will break you down. You're asking Brooks Lennon to beat a guy. You're asking, Jurgen Damm, you're asking John or Jurgen Damm to, be skillful and take on a guy. They're not going to do it. They just don't have the talent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with that. And by the way, now that we're talking about breaking people down with Remedy in the midfield, having to play the role of our old friend Darlington Nagbe, I guess, somewhat in that role. Did you see the goal that Nagbe scored last week, or when was that, over the weekend?
Anybody who flips the ball up to themselves has some serious skill.
Yeah. We were texting within the network here that we all miss that guy greatly. Still think he should have stayed, but wanted to get home. Still crying a little bit inside. All right, Dave, what else? What else do we have on the agenda here? I'm running out of paper on my computer here.
Well,
so our next opponent is Miami, right? Or what else you got?
Well, what I was going to say is that the timing of the coaching search, which is something I wanted to talk about. It seems like, and I may be overreading this, but it seems like the Atlanta United organization is content to go with an interim manager for the remainder of the year and do a search in the offseason. And the question I have to you, Mikey Dobbs, is why? Why are we not? And maybe we can't. Maybe they are aggressively going after a new manager and they can't find it, but it doesn't seem like it.
I'll tell you why. Because they screwed it up so badly last time, they can't afford to, make another awful decision like bringing in Frank DeBoer. I mean, that's the simplest way I can put it. I think, there's probably some options out there. I also say number two is that, Eels and the team, they still wanted to go into this club with the thinking of just, again, thinking maybe bigger than any other club. And maybe that's not excluding maybe some names that otherwise we would think it would be impossible. I think they at least want to go on that hunt and give Eels the way, the leeway to network and see what's possible. I guess those are my two main answers. I usually would want to have a third, but and also, well, I guess the third is the fact that, I mean, look,
the dreaded third.
The dreaded third is, well, it's pretty easy, right? I mean, this season is somewhat of a wash, even though the trophy would look the same if there's a trophy. But it's still like
wait. Why would you say the season is a wash? We're 3-3.
At some point there will be an asterisk on almost every sport this season, even though the players care just as much and the fans want it. There just is. It sucks, but I do think that is there as an underlying theme. As much as we want baseball and, whatever happens with college football, it's probably going to be a tournament between the 4 ACC teams, which probably would have been ACC and the SEC teams anyway. And, whoever wins that probably would have won anyway. But it just doesn't have the same impact. I don't know. It just doesn't. It's been a crappy
So
year, Dave.
do you think that we, for example, so Barcelona passed on Pochettino. They took Ronald Koeman,
Yeah.
an old De Boer teammate in the Dutch national team, um, who I think is very much a very similar coach to De Boer. So good luck, Barcelona. Um, but
Yeah, I think that Pochettino didn't want the job because he knew. I mean, why take a dumpster fire based on a bunch of players that are big wages, in their 30s. I mean, they've got, and that's why Messi wants to leave. They know that they're in a complete rebuild, just like a baseball team. It's going to take 3 years before there's a light at the end of that tunnel.
do you think that Atlanta United made a run at Pochettino?
I have no idea. Honestly, I mean, it's all conjecture as far as I'm
Because
concerned.
there should be a connection. Darren Eales knew
Yeah.
Pochettino from his Tottenham days. They know each other.
Yeah, I guarantee. Like, yes, I think so. Yes, I think at some level of communication to Eels to him has probably happened to feel out the waters on whether that's even worth pursuing. So yeah, I think so. Now, how much traction that it has had in terms of being a real conversation, I have no idea. But I'm sure they took a swing in some capacity.
One of the things that continues to flabbergast me is that so much emphasis, even in this modern era, is still put on the playing career of the manager, right? So De Boer gets credibility because he was a terrific player. Ronald Koeman gets credibility because he's a terrific player, right?
Thierry Henry from yeah.
Yeah, and the question is, um, there are some examples, Guardiola being a classic one of a
Zinedine
terrific
Zidane.
player, Zidane, but for for every one of them, there's probably 10 other examples. A Jurgen Klopp was nobody as a soccer player. A Mourinho, nobody as a soccer player, right? Why is there the emphasis on the playing career for coaching? I see this even at the youth level. All these parents are like, well, what did you do as a player? Does it really matter?
Yeah.
I mean, does that make you a good coach?
I once did
I
a
mean, if
bicycle kick when I was in 6th grade. It dribbled into the corner. Does that help?
I mean,
No.
how many of, if you just, let's say we forget soccer, right? And we say, all right, how many of the great coaches, the Nick Sabans, the Mike Krzyzewskis, the whatever, how many of them were famous as a player?
Yeah.
Very few. There are very few players who were terrific as a player and also terrific as a coach. They exist, so you can't ignore players. But why the emphasis on players?
Yeah, I don't. That's the tough part. I don't think you can exclude a player either because I think again, I would say it's 50-50. I mean, I think there have been some of the best coaches of all time have had some level of professional, even if they weren't like a star, that they played at a high level, so that they
Phil
understand. Like
Jackson was a
Bobby
great player.
Robson, like those. There's a lot of players like that are really famous coaches that I think to some degree they were like the black sheep of the in the professional career, and they weren't the greatest, and so they transitioned into coaching as something naturally that they could do well.
But Alex Ferguson, mediocre player.
Yeah. So
Many
media.
of
So
these.
you want So that's what I would agree with. You would want a mediocre player that played at a high level but got out early and started coaching. Like that to me would be the ideal recipe.
Well, my point being that so I do think that it helps to have been around the professional level. If you have no connection or whatever, then it's hard to know what it was like to be in there. But this idea that these famous players get more credibility as a coach is madness, right? Because if you look at the track record, very often it's the players who were mediocre players who turn out to be way better coaches.
Yeah. So who do you think we're looking at then? Do you think that we're looking over in Europe, which it sounds like, I guess there's been some conversation with Frank DeBoer since he's been back that he was saying that Eels and Boca Negra and the front office were very much wanting to transition to a European style coach, which makes no sense, right? Given the culture on the team, right? And they were talking about this on ESPN FC. Why would you, try to make that type of move when the culture of the team is clearly heavily Argentinian, South American? Why wouldn't you look, south of the equator, frankly, to figure out somebody to come in and play kind of that free soccer that we love here in Atlanta United?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, they should be looking at the coach who's coaching the champions of Chile and the coach who's coaching the champions of, some of these South American. Obviously it may be hard to get the Argentinas, or maybe even the Brazils, but some of the leagues that are still very good. Some coach who's really doing well in Uruguay or Chile or,
even Liga MX. I think there's probably there's been players that seem to be migrating that are not yet in their final years of
yeah, those Liga
playing.
MX coaches would love to come to the U.S. because, it's a stereotype, but it tends to be true. The rashness with that the organizations make coaching decisions in Liga MX, they fire people, their first loss kind of thing, and it's madness. Whereas Atlanta United, for all we have 80,000 people in the stands or whatever, there's much more patience amongst the club, I would think.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the direction I would be looking, which is south of our borders to find the next Atlanta United coach.
Yeah, I mean that's even the crazy thing is as maligned as college soccer is, right? Bruce Arena, terrific college soccer coach, went on to be the best MLS coach of all time. Caleb Porter, who's now doing very well at Columbus again, was the college coach of the year at Akron or whatever. I don't think Atlanta United is looking at the best college coaches, who have a history of winning, because they think, college soccer is not the same. But
yeah,
I'd look at a winner before I looked at a name, right? I would much rather have a guy who's been phenomenal for, 6 years in the ACC or whatever, or in the Pac-10 than I would, a guy who has very little track record as a professional, name in Europe. I mean, Juventus hiring Pirlo, in my opinion, is going to be a disaster, right? Because Pirlo, as great a player as he was, right, I don't think he has much of a chance of being a good coach.
Yeah. All right, Dave. We've been running almost an hour here, I think. Anything else you want to hit on before we sign off?
Big game tomorrow night against Miami.
Miami.
Right?
That's right. What time is it kickoff? 7:30?
Yeah, I think so. It's a must win. They started out 0-5.
Yeah.
If we're gonna, maintain momentum, we've had to be honest, between the games that we played prior to the MLS, the pandemic, and the MLS is back, and then the games we had coming out of it, we've had a really weak schedule.
Yeah,
We've got to take advantage of that.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm excited for, another game, no matter what the result. I'm just happy to be watching soccer again. That's for sure. So
stay safe out there, dear podcast listeners. Don't get near anybody else indoors.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe, if we're going to maybe touch about that a little bit, what do you think about them polling people about the possibility of having a socially distanced crowd at Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, I mean, I put a poll on. There wasn't a huge response. I think there was like only 10 or so responses, but it was 50-50 in terms of if there was a plan for it to be safe, and you obviously enforce people to wear I'm assuming things like wearing masks, and that there was 6 or plus 10 feet separation between you and the other folks in the seats, that there might be openness for people to, go into the building.
My point, I think, as much as you could clearly social distance in Mercedes-Benz, it'd be easy, but I just don't think it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I think, at this point, with all the soccer you're seeing in Europe, why not just enjoy it on TV at this point? I think that's the right
Yep.
choice. As much as I would like to go back to Game Changers and get one of those steak sandwiches on fries or whatever it is, need to stay safe. So let's do it.
Stay safe, everybody.
And Dave, let's try to get back on the Zoom again after this Miami game and bring some more content to the listeners. And thanks for joining. Hope everybody has a great evening and tunes into the Miami game tomorrow. Take care, everybody. All right. Thanks for listening. If anybody actually made it this far in the podcast, we'd love to hear your feedback on Twitter at ATL On Fire. And tell your friends to subscribe. We are on iTunes, Google Play, and really any sort of podcast platform that you're on.